Well, on behalf of the Burton family, thank you guys so much for coming. If you would, pray with me. Father God, we thank you for who you are and all that you've done for us. We thank you for Barry and how much he meant to all the people in this room. We thank you for diving and how much that meant to him. Lord, we pray that this time would be honoring. Lord, we thank you for what you did for us on the cross. Lord, that you died for our sins and that you made a way that we could be with you forever. Lord, we thank you that we have the same hope that Barry had. And we pray that, Lord, if there's anybody in here who doesn't have that hope, that they would know it. Lord, we just ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. I don't like talking with microphones. You the coaches would. That's what I want. That's what I do with class. I don't do this. Yeah, there you go. This is just awkward. I don't know how to start these things. This is my first time. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. My mom really appreciates it. Our whole family really appreciates it. I'm not going to make it through, so, I hope you brought your translators to understand what tears and words are. But I just have a few thoughts that I want to share with you guys about Dad, about what I have learned in my short 32 years of life thus far that I learned from Mom and Dad, and then hopefully set the stage for whomever else wants to come up and share some stories about Barry. We want you to do that. This season's been really, really hard for our family. We lost my wife's father about 4 months ago. And then, of course, we just lost Dad. So it's just been a good old-fashioned hard season in life, But through all of this, I know that God is good all the time, right? And all the time, God is good. So I've had a lot of time to be still and think, because we worked really hard taking care of Dad. And then when he passed, things got still. So it was good to be still and to rest and to think with thoughts. Dad would always think his thoughts. I remember when we were still living in Talbot, but we had the shop in Kingsport, he didn't mind his hour-long commute one way because he got to think his thoughts. So Dad taught me that it's good to be able to be still and think your thoughts. So I was driving to work one day, and I had a car thought. And it doesn't really have any bearing on anything, but I thought it was kind of interesting, kind of like those worthless NFL stats that you'll hear sometimes where it's like this one person has done this one thing. Well, it's because it's only happened once this year kind of thing. But anyway, my car thought was that I realized that I did not even know Dad half of his life. That he had lived half of his life, over half of it, before he ever thought about Zach. That doesn't have any bearing on anything. But I thought it was interesting. He lived so much of his life. He had been on so many adventures. He had been through so many different experiences before I ever showed up. Which means there's a lot of people out there that Dad had an opportunity to meet and to impact. I heard Dad called a lot of things in his life. Some things I can't share because we are in a church after all. But some of the names that I have heard, William Barry Burton called, in the last month and a half, I've heard people call him a legend. A legend.
I've heard people call him an icon, a mentor, a fighter, a survivor, a father, dad, padre, Grandpa Barry, Opa. He was a husband, friend, and he was a child. He was a son. Like I said, Dad met a lot of people in life. And for the people that got to know Dad, if it was just passing through, a season, or those of you that get to say that you were lifelong friends of Dad, you knew he loved a lot of things. He was very passionate. Dad was a passionate man. You knew he loved history. He loved his models. Good Lord, he loved his models. Our basement is a testament to how much he loved his models. He loved the outdoors. He loved to travel. But Dad's greatest love in life was scuba diving. It truly, truly was. And he would seize every opportunity he could to share that with everyone that would give him the time of day. If it was just an invitation to come try it, to hear about it because you've never heard about it before, or you've been to Bon Air 30 times and it's time for you to go on your 31st trip. It didn't matter where you were. He wanted you to know about scuba diving. And boy, I absolutely hated it growing up. It wore me out. It didn't matter where we were. We'd be at the mom and pop restaurant in the backwoods. We could be at Olive Garden. Guaranteed, every time somebody would get up, come over to the table, Barry, blah, 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 scuba diving, blah, blah, blah. Okay? Or, even better, Dad would get up, come over here. We're going to go talk to this person. Blah, 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 scuba diving, blah, blah. And if you think that's all that Dad knew how to talk about, you'd be wrong. Because if you weren't interested in talking about scuba diving, he'd want to talk to you about whatever U.S. military conflict during World War II that you had any remote knowledge on. So he was quite the history buff. But as a kid, I really didn't like that. It's two things I didn't want to talk about. 6 years old, sitting at the dinner table and wherever we were. But sure enough, no matter where we went, Dad always met somebody that he had apparently known forever. Dad never met a stranger in all of his life. And it's taken me a very long time to get to the point where I understood that mentality or how God made Dad. But he really never met a stranger. It didn't matter if it was somebody he had just bumped into on the street, had passed into the shop a week ago and they just happened to run into each other, or one of his friends or students or somebody that he has already started building and developing a relationship with. Dad treated you like he'd known you forever, right? Immediately you just picked up where you left off. He might not remember your name, but as soon as you said, my name is, oh yeah, absolutely, how so-and-so. And he would just carry right on into that. And I appreciate better now that really came from a place of loving people. Dad loved scuba diving. Now, like I said, I didn't know Dad, but less than half of his life. But in my thoughts, I don't ever recall Dad talking about going and diving by himself. The solo diver certification was not at the top of his list of things he wanted to teach. He wanted to go with people. He wanted to teach people to dive because he wanted more buddies. The more buddies Dad had, the more friends he had, the more opportunity he would have to go diving. And he loved everyone that he was given an opportunity to, in his way. Right? Dad could be Dad. He has that. He could straighten you up when you got out of line. But like I said, I understand better now that he treated people in a way that he wanted them to feel known. When you spoke to Barry Burton, when you came into the dive shop or you ran into him on the street, you would walk away from that conversation being heard, being listened to, being known. If it was only for a brief moment, he wanted you to know that I know you. Right? And Dad didn't talk about it much, but like I said, he truly loved. And through his life, he has taught my brother and my sister and myself, where true love comes from, right? What true love is, where that comes from. True life-changing, chain-breaking, eternal love. And it's not a moment, it's a decision. It's something you commit to every day. And Dad would do that. I mean, until he couldn't, he dragged himself to that shop every single day, ready for whoever came through the door. He wanted to see you. He was ready for you because he loved you, right? And growing up, I would hear Mom and Dad, they would talk about how, the scuba shop and scuba diving was their ministry. And I didn't understand that. I didn't appreciate that. It didn't jive with me, if you want to think of it that way. But I understand now that it wasn't my concept of what a ministry is. For Mom and Dad, it was finding a common medium, which is scuba diving. We loved it. We want other people to love it. And then, with every fiber of his being, doing the absolute best he could that an imperfect person can, he would try and love in that medium for as much and as long as he was given that time for. He wanted to connect with you. He wanted to connect with people every day of his life. That's what he wanted to do. And he wanted to take him scuba diving. It is what it is. So I think that if Dad was able to make one last appearance, I think if we had known, if we'd gotten the letter in the mail, hey, this is coming up, get ready, here it is, right? But if he had one last opportunity to do a nitrox class, he loved his nitrox classes. Or teach that ETSU lecture, or just do that dive briefing right before we got in the water, wherever it is. There's a few things that I think he would want you to know, because it's what he taught me, and it's what I'm teaching my children, and it's what I hope that they'll teach their children. I sat in on a bunch of those classes for a lot of years. And he always said the same thing. It might have not been right as he sat down, but it was once he got into class mode, he'd look you in the eye and say, I'm glad you're here. Right? I'm glad your name, that made the time to come spend it with him. I'm glad you're here. I'm really glad you're here. Because Dad loved it. He loved people, and he appreciated it. For those of you that made the time to go out of your way to talk to Dad, to do that class, to let him go on about that story that you've actually heard 18 times, he really appreciated it. Because he loved to tell a good story, but he loved people. And then he would hit you with a couple of one-liners, right? Because Dad was full of one-liners. He's really good at them. So he'd want you to remember to be safe. Anytime we ever left town, the city you're going to is dangerous. They got a high crime rate. Yes, Dad, we know. It's like, all right, well, just make sure you get a gas station with good lighting. Got it, Dad. I understand. But from a scuba diving perspective, when he was trying to make a point, if he was trying to get your attention, he didn't feel like he had it, he'd ask me, he'd say, how do you get to make 1,000 dives? And just let it float out there. His dad wasn't afraid of a quiet room. And he'd say, well, the way you make $1,000 is you make the first 999 safely. You know what? 2 plus 2 is 4. Carry on. Let's go. And then he would remind you, no one can breathe for you, and no one can think for you. Because he wanted you to be safe. He wanted you to be safe while you were scuba diving, but he wanted that to leave that environment. Wherever you went, wherever you find yourself, he wanted you to be safe, and he wanted you to think for yourself. He wanted you to take care of yourself. Because Dad hated losing his friends. You didn't see Dad cry a whole lot, but when he would lose his friends, sometimes it was just stuff happens. Sometimes it was natural. But that was hard. His dad loved him. And he really, really hated it when he lost friends because they did stupid stuff. Or they got too smart for what they were doing. Because it's just not worth it. And he'd tell you, I'd rather you sit here and complain about whatever than me never get to see you again. He cared about people. He loves people. And then, I think if he knew that if it was his last opportunity to get to talk to you, he'd really want to make sure you understood what his plan was, where he was going, how the game worked, right? Because he would let you know. He would always tell us, you know, if I get hurt in a truck and I don't make it back, he's like, I've got one heck of an insurance policy, so you don't need to worry about me, right? That's why we're sitting here in chairs with t-shirts on the back of them. He's not worried about it anymore. But he'd want you to know why. He'd really want you to know why. And he wants you to know that he loves you, even though life is hard, and there's a lot of bad, and there's even better good in it. He wants you to know that he loves you and he cares about you. And that was because he knew that no matter who you are or what you have done, there is a God that created you, that loves you. In fact, it's pretty remarkable how much that God loves you. Because for the creator of the universe, who has all power and all knowledge, he can't stand the thought of not having you with him for eternity. We get to be here for a moment. And maybe that moment is spent scuba diving. That's fine. The rest of us usually end up doing something a little bit different than that. But the creator of the universe refuses to spend eternity without us because he loves us so much. And in fact, he loves us so much, and his desire is so great for that he made a way for us to be able to come back to him, to be in right relationship with him. And he sent his son, Jesus Christ. He was born. He lived a perfect life. He died on a cross. And he rose again on the third day. And then Dad would really, he'd get giddy. He'd be like, man, God, it's so simple. You don't have to do anything. That's the best part. All you got to do is believe. All you have to do is believe in his name. Believe what he has done, what he is doing, and what he is yet to do. Because that's what Dad believed. I know he did. So, this is hard. This is awful. I'm not looking forward to going to work on Monday and him not being there to tell me what I did wrong and to call this person to fix it. But he's in a better place. He's in the best place. I don't know what he's doing. If the good Lord gave him the the time. I'm sure he's tried to sit him down at a table to talk about decompression theory. Because he loved it so much. But he wants you to be there too one day. Just like Dad didn't want to go on dives by himself, he really hopes that one day he'll get to see you there too. And then you do this really horrible thing where he just make this pointed statement, catch you right in between the eyes, and you just be quiet. Let it simmer. Is this going to make you mad? Are you going to ask a question? Whatever the case may be. Dad was really good at that. I like doing that too. Can usually get a good reaction out of people. But then you'd look you in the eye and he'd ask you, do you have any questions? Do you know that I love you? Do you know I'm glad you're here? Do you know I want you to take care of yourself? Do you know what I believe? Do you understand it? I really hope you believe the same thing. If you didn't have any questions, he'd probably do something real fun, like discuss whatever the dive plan was. And he would tell you to go back there and bother Gabe and Caleb in the compressor room, make sure Emily knows that we're going out. And then he'd hit you with those immortal Barry Burton words that he loves so much, right? Let's go dive, you want to? Because I was Dad. Let's go dive. So, that's all I have to say. You guys are welcome. A single tear did not leave my face. Do not follow me home. So, we're going to maintain the same feeling of being casual and sharing stories, and I'm going to go sit down, and if anybody has anything that they would like to share their favorite Barry Burton story, or just any thoughts they have, the floor is yours. Thank you guys for being here.
I think Zach might have missed his call to the ministry. Let me ditch my call. Oh yeah. So Zach didn't shed a tear. I don't know that I'll be able to maintain that. But this is a room full of a lot of new faces to me, and it really emphasizes how many people that Dad impacted throughout his life. I'm Carter. I guess I shouldn't skip that part since it is a room full of new faces. So Zach is my little brother. I know you would never believe that by looking at us. But it was funny because when Zach was little, so Zach was born 2 weeks before I graduated from high school. And when Zach was little, every time I would hear Dad say, Carter, 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 there was literally a 50-50 chance that he was even talking to me. Because every time he was trying to get Zach's attention, and Marilyn would be like, Zach, it's Zach. And it's like, poor guy, even at Christmas, he's like, Carter, hand out the Christmas presents. And I'm like, you want me to do it? So Zach would be under the Christmas tree. But it's funny because that actually came full circle. Fortunately, I was able to have some communications for a couple of the last days in the hospital. And every time he wanted my attention, he called me Zach. Every time. I told Mary Helen, I was texting Mary Helen, like, both of you guys, I was texting you guys, like, some of the things that he was saying, and he was saying, I understand you, and, I can understand what you're saying to me. And I texted him, and I was like, I think there's an even odds chance that he actually thinks I'm Zach. So, kudos, first of all, to Marilyn. She has absolutely been a rock through what has been a very difficult, especially the last 6 weeks that he was in the hospital. Really, she was staying there, and then when they moved into UT, she's driving like 90 minutes one way, But I do kind of have a funny story. So I was in Berlin when he went into the hospital. So when Zach signaled me that he had gone into the hospital, and there wasn't really an assessment of his condition at that time, but it took me a couple weeks actually to wrap up what I was doing in Germany. So by the time I made it to Tennessee and his bedside, you guys you were 2.5 weeks into. And I mean, they had black circles under their eyes. The first time I came in the hospital, I actually have a picture on my phone. There was this love seat sized couch, and their butts are both in the middle, and they both have their feet in the floor and their head on one of the arms. So they slept the first 2 hours I was there. But so Dad had been intubated when he was here in the hospital, and then they extubated him, and then they had to move him to UT, so they intubated him again to move him. And I don't know what your guys' experience is with seeing that. That's really, I understand that it's essential, but it's really brutal, really, really, really hard to see. You know, it's really difficult. So I had been there maybe 3 days, 4 days, something like that, and they were talking. He was breathing. You know, they can measure how much you're breathing versus how much the machine is breathing for you. And he was doing more and more of the breathing, so they extubated him like the 3rd or 4th day. And she messaged me in the morning. She just got into the hospital. I was staying in Knoxville, and I was taking care of a couple things, but then I was on my way. And I was thinking, you know, this is like true golden rule. Like, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And if I'm ever intubated for a week, when they pull that tube out, I want a beer. So I'm like, I know just the thing. And so I show up at the hospital. I've got my backpack on my back. I'm like, clang, 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 clang. I'm going up there. I get in, and he's wide awake. So I've seen him like 2-3 days, pretty much non-responsive. Maybe it was like blink your eyes or move your head. You know, it was very nominal communication. And so I come in there, I have this huge smile on my face, and I unzip my backpack, and I pull a 6-pack of beer out. And we're in the ICU. So that's not copacetic in the ICU. So I pull this 6-pack of beer out, and I'm like, Dad, I brought some beer. And Marilyn's like, WTF. Carter actually brought beer up here. That's not a joke. And he's like looking at me, and he's kind of like blinking, and I think he's like trying to process it, take the whole thing in. So anyway, he was still sleepy, kind of in and out, and so I kind of messed around with him for a little bit, and then Marilyn and I settled in on the little love seat couch that she and Zach had been sleeping on, and I'm like, Marilyn, you want a beer? They're cold. And she was like, no, I think I'm good. So I'm like, you know, I got cold beer in my backpack. There's a lot of machinery in here. You can't really see from the hall as the nurse walks by. So I'm like, Psh. So no lie, like 6 hours later, like Dad's kind of becoming, you know, they're coming in, nudging him, poking on him. Can you feel your hand? Can you feel your feet? They're stimulating him, and he's getting more active throughout the day and was communicating more. And it was getting late. Marilyn left. I was staying there in Knoxville right beside the hospital, so it was pretty easy for me to stay a little later. And so he wants to talk now. And it was really difficult. He was really laboring to talk. And he was talking. He was like, Zach. Zach. And then I'm like, I'm right here, Dad. And I'm having to like literally put my ear right up to his lips to even discern what he's saying. And he's like, I want. And just even saying 2 words, you could tell he was like he had saying I want was like climbing stairs or something. He's like, and he would literally sit there for 60 seconds and like gather himself. And then he would be like, I want. And I would repeat it back to him, you want? What do you want? What do you want? And again, we went through this cycle like maybe 5-6 times. And I'm like, maybe okay, I got the I want part. Maybe let's skip that and get to the middle of the sentence. You want what? And he finally says, I want beer. I'm like, Dad. understand, but that was like 6 hours ago. It was gonna get hot. And he told me like 3, 4 more times, I want beer. I want beer. I mean, it got so bad that I actually went over to the trash can that I had stuck the beers down into, and I like reached down in this medical waste bin and pulled one of these Michelob Ultras out, and I'm like, Dad, I drank all the beer. The nurse said you can't have it anyway, because you wouldn't stay awake long enough to swallow, they said, so I couldn't give him beer, but I thought that was funny. I was, pretty happy after drinking our 6-pack of beer, but then I did feel a little guilty 6 hours later when I want beer. But I was right. That is what he would want. I think that the main thing that I think about, obviously there's a trillion memories in here, and my first impression, there were no people in here when I first walked in, and Marilyn and Zach had been setting everything up. My first thought was, I would have this many dive t-shirts, except my wife has this rule that if you haven't worn something in the last year, it's gone. So a lot of my t-shirts, so Marilyn was obviously very accommodating of the world's largest t-shirt collection, but it is a lot of memories. So I'm glad that you've maintained this, and it's great to see everybody representing in here. And I've got my Dad bought me this t-shirt in Truck Lagoon in 1995, and I had 50 years with Dad. There's a lot to be thankful for. Obviously, when you get to the season of your life where you start losing your parents, you start to talk to your other adult friends about, their own experience with the passing of their mother or their father, and you really do realize that, we had a hell of a long run. 50 years is a real abundance of blessings in terms of the amount of time that we got to share together. And, my first scuba dive on Dad's hip when I was 5 years old, behind Nana's house, in the mud. Literally, he's like, I didn't internalize this at the time, but, I probably weighed 35 pounds, something like that. And so I can swim in 2 feet of water, 3 feet of water, and he's probably literally just like crawling beside me as we swam along the side of the water there. But, I don't know exactly, but I've made about 1,100 dives, and I think about 850 dives that I got to make with my dad. So, that in and of itself is just, my cup overflows with the time that we got to spend together. And, I'm really happy. I know that one of his most cherished things was the community of people, and he had this transplantable enthusiasm, and he could get so many people, like people that were uncomfortable swimming, and he could get them to scuba dive. And I remember doing demonstrations of like giant stride entries and stuff off the side of the pool back in the Carson Newman days, and I just remember coming up to him and just being like, I know you're like the apostle of scuba diving, but, these two over here, no bueno. I don't think these, they don't want to do the giant stride entry. I'm pretty sure they probably don't want to be scuba diving. I don't know if they knew what they were signing up for, or now the reality of it is here, but he could overcome it. He would just get them, like they were the only person in the world, and he would talk to them real slowly. Okay, now let's go underwater. Boo, 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 boo. And so he had a real way of people even who were reluctant to do certain things, and certain of those things are, pretty stressful. I really appreciate what you guys did with the pictures. It's a tremendous set of memories, and it really brings back a lot of emotions. And Zach, I appreciate you standing by your mom through this. And Mary Helen also was present and was facilitating. I feel bad that it was a couple weeks before I was able to get back, and But I really feel blessed that there were a couple of days, the last couple of days that I spent with him in the hospital, that he was able to communicate. And I did feel like, he knew what I was saying. And he did tell me in his, I understand, he kind of got on this whole I understand thing, and he told me that he understood Jesus. Yeah, and I asked him, I was like, Dad, do you want to go be with Jesus? I was like, it's okay, we're okay, everybody here is okay. You don't need to take care of us. If you need to go be with Jesus, go be with Jesus. And he went through, I want. This time it wasn't weird, but he said, I want to live. So he had that flame and that passion. And even though he was absolutely suffering, and it was so counter, the memories I have of him, just like these huge legs, and he swam like a freaking whale. I mean, he just could produce so much thrust, and he could create such velocity even with doubles on his back. It was hard to keep up with. So he was such a vibrant guy and so much energy, and it was interesting to see, like, after everything that he had been through. And he has had a hard physical time way before he was in the hospital. And I know that you've stuck by him and helped him a lot. And, we love you guys. We love both you guys. And it's really tremendous what you did. I think that when I think back about my own sons, and how we interact with our own children, including our parents. The one thing about Dad, I know it obviously specifically applies to scuba diving, but everything he had zeal about, he was a tremendous teacher. A lot of things he didn't care about, he couldn't really carry on. And this is unusual, and growing up in Jefferson City / Knoxville, Tennessee, everybody's big Tennessee fans, and they'll talk about Tennessee football and, ad nauseum. He didn't really have much of an interest in that. He was kind of, On Saturdays, he wanted to blow bubbles. He didn't want to sit and watch college football. But the things that he was interested about, he would study, absolutely study. And he was just a fountain of knowledge about those things. And if you would sit and listen to it, man, he would give it to you. So, it was a great trait from a father to a son, and from a father to sons. The desire to communicate knowledge and expand horizons and expand the world that they live in. And he was really tremendous at that. And I love him. I love you guys. And I really appreciate everybody coming and taking time. And it means a lot. It means a lot to our family. And we really do appreciate it. So, God bless William Mary Burton.
Good afternoon. I'm Brian. I'd like to share a few Barry stories. When I look around at the amount of divers in this room, I'm sure this is just a drop in the bucket, but I'll tell some of the adventures I had. My ventures in scuba diving started with Barry in 1995. I signed up for an ETSU open water class. At that time, Barry would come up from Jefferson City with a truckload of scuba gear. And, we dive at the ETSU pool. He still worked full time then. And as the semester went on, I got to meet Marilyn, and Carter was working at the dive shop there then. That's when I learned the importance of filling the cascade. And little Zach, during this time, Zach was on the floor in a blanket playing with his toys. But he was always there for scuba class at ETSU. When the semester was over, we got to go down to Jefferson City at the dive shop and do our open water dives in Cherokee Lake. The adventure got interesting when we started loading everything up in the dive boat. Now, if you guys weren't around this time, the dive boat was legendary. This was a 40-foot houseboat. The fence. The 40-foot houseboat had caught on fire and sank to the bottom of the lake. And this is a true story. Barry didn't buy it from the marina. He didn't buy it from a friend. He bought it sitting on the bottom of the lake. He bought it from the insurance company. He raised it up. They gutted it, and the dive boat, the second story, was a wooden deck, just like at your house. Had 4x4 posts. It was customized for diving. Had a ladder you could go up on the top. Had places to hang all your dive gear. And on the first morning that I was there, we loaded all the divers and thought this is going to be pretty cool. He's got a little outboard motor and a little captain's chair, and thought we were going to go puttering across the lake. Only problem was the dive boat didn't run. Didn't run at all. The way we got out to the lake was a ski boat pulled up beside us. They were divers, and they hooked a tow rope to the dive boat and pulled us out across the lake. And this was so comical, they even made T-shirts about it. Later, had an opportunity to go with Barry to Bon Air, and one of the amazing things about going with Barry to Bon Air was everybody knew him. I mean, in the airport, the dive shop. He'd been down there a lot, and as it ended up, he'd been there with the shop over 50 times. So that was a awesome accomplishment. Also learned the meaning of Barry time. If you weren't experienced with this, Barry time meant that he wanted you to show up at the dive site at 9, but we were lucky to go diving by 2. He had to do a lecture, he had to make sure your gear was right, and you better pay attention to his lecture or we're going to start over. On one of the trips to Florida, we had a plan to dive half a day, drive home. You guys know it's a long drive home. What we didn't know was he planned on diving the second half of the day. So we got out of the water about 5 in the afternoon at Jenny Springs, loaded everything up, and drove home. It was 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. He got back up and went to the dive shop the next day, just everything was normal. On another occasion, we were on a dive trip out to St. Louis to Lead Mine, and it was Barry's birthday. And I didn't know it was Barry's birthday when we planned this particular dive trip. We didn't leave early in the morning either. I think he taught a class that morning at the Greenville YMCA. And after he got done, we loaded up and we're driving out there. And everybody kept calling. I got all these phone calls. And as it went on, I felt really bad that we were out there on his birthday, so I brought it up. I said, "Hey, Barry, sure you'd rather be doing something else today on your birthday?" And he looked at me just as serious and said, "I want to go diving." So we didn't bring up his birthday anymore. On multiple adventures, we got to go cave diving in North Florida. And Barry's favorite thing to do after cave diving was sit around the dive shop. And at that time, the dive shop was owned by one of the older gentlemen, Bill Renker. And after diving, we'd pull up a chair and sit in the shade. And Bill and Barry would tell stories about the old days of diving with some of the legends like Sheck Exley and Wes Skies. It was very interesting to me to hear a lot of the equipment they used. They didn't have a fancy dive computer, didn't have any big dive lights, also didn't have a good BCD. At the time, when they were in the water and they wanted to regulate their buoyancy, they had 2 Clorox bottles that were tied to their waist. And when you wanted to go up, you took the regulator out, put a little air in the Clorox bottle, and you went up. When you wanted to go down, you let the air out of the Clorox bottle and you went down. And everybody had their own Clorox bottles at the time that were decorated. And that was common in cave diving for the time. When we started diving the Great Quarry, Barry's little red truck would always be parked at the bottom. And that was Barry's parking spot. You know, he didn't get up and down that hill very well. And this was a time when a lot of other people came to the area that didn't know us. We started getting the Virginia Tech people, we started getting the Asheville, the Boone, and everybody would always come up and complain and say, why does it get to park there? And the answer was, well, when you've got 11,000 lifetime dives, we'll let you park there. And nobody complained about it anymore. The first dive trip I got to go to Mexico was with Barry. Yucatan, we went to Dos Ojos. And anybody that's been there knows it's a lot of steps to get down, and it was an adventure for Barry to get down to the water. But we got him in the water, and he was ready to go. He was like a kid in a candy shop. And we had a guide that kind of planned what we wanted to do, and the dive plan was he put myself and Barry at the back of the group, fairly good sized group, to make sure nobody got lost or anybody had a problem. Well, as we listened to all the rules about don't swim under the rock, don't go out of the way, guess what Barry did? He was like a kid in a candy shop. We went through all kinds of holes, and I didn't know if I was going to fit. But big old grin the whole way, and when we got up, we couldn't tell anybody about it because that's what we weren't supposed to do. But he had a blast on that. And another trip out to Grand Cayman, even before we planned the trip, he talked about these great big barrel sponges. I mean, they were big enough for a diver to set in. He knew where they were because it was a fairly deep spot and the hurricanes couldn't get them, and he just going on and on about we're going to have to see these. Well, I didn't know until we got out there, but they were in 150 feet of water. And most of us were certified, but this was considered a technical dive. So when we got to the dive shop, the signs everywhere, no technical diving. And I did exactly what Barry said. I went and got my tanks of air and had it analyzed. And I must have been one of the later people to get there, because when I got there, the manager at the dive shop said, please don't tell me what Barry's going to take y'all doing. I said, yes, ma'am. But she knew where we were going. And we made it down to see these giant barrel sponges. That's just a few of my adventures over the years, and looking around all these divers. I'm sure there's a lot more, but for the family, we really appreciate the time we got to have with Barry. Thank you.
I'm a preacher, so I don't need a microphone too much. If I get this many people together, I start taking up a collection. So you have to watch me about going on too long. But my name is Brian Rose. I've been certified since 2003. There were several years I didn't get a chance to dive, but met Marilyn back then. I didn't know Carter, but I seen Zach. Kind of like what Brian was talking about. He was just crawling around me a little. My daughter was born in 2003, so Marilyn got to see her, got to know her when she was little. In fact, my wife was pregnant with twins at the time. And my wife asked me, she said, are you going to push the girls to go scuba diving? And I said, no, not at all. I said, well, whichever one dives is going to get a lot more Christmas presents than the other. So, again, I got certified in 2003. My daughter got certified in 2014. And my wife lost the other daughter that we had. But she got certified. And when it come time, I'm like, I know who I'm going to take her to. I said, I'm going to take her to Barry. There's nobody else I would trust my child with than Barry. And I said, he was the one. As he said, he was the apostle of scuba diving. He knew everything. When I started hearing, they said, Barry, if you add up all the time, it's like 3 years underwater. And you know, when I seen over there, I think if there was a picture, he got certified. Well, there was a note that he'd been teaching since '73 at least, and then even before that. I started thinking, I said, that's almost as long as I've been here alive. I was born in '71, and then he's been teaching up before then. I said, this man's been, you know, in the water longer than I've been alive. But he's just been such a great influence on me, and I really appreciate it. Appreciate the fact that, you know, he welcomed me in. Like Zach said, you know, he would always, you know, welcome you and want to talk to you. The one story I've got about Barry was when I got certified, we went to the Springs in Florida. And while we're going down there, you know, it was talks about we're going to eat. And Barry's like, we're going to eat some seafood. And I'm like, oh, good. Barry knows the best seafood. I mean, we're in Florida. You know, you throw a rock on either side, you get fresh seafood. And we're down there, and I'm like, Barry, where are we going to eat at? He goes, Red Lobster. Okay. So, but I do appreciate the family. Love you all. And again, just thank you for letting Barry come into our lives. He was a great blessing, and I appreciate you. So, thank you all.
I'm Sarah, I'm Brian's daughter, and I'm not loud, and I'm definitely not a talker. But I remember meeting Barry when I was 11 years old, and I thought, man, Barry's old. Like, this man's on a cane, and like, he's getting in the water. And then I just kept seeing him, and then suddenly he's on a walker. And I remember seeing him at the quarry one day. Somebody took him almost like, his walker had to be almost completely under the water. And then he finally gave it to him, and they took it back, and he was like a torpedo through that water. But I remember being so terrified my first like shore dive. I was in Bon Air, and I'm seeing this big, huge ocean, and I'm thinking, I'm going to float away, and Barry's never going to see me again, and he's going to lose me, and I'm never going to go home. Like, I'm just going to die here. And Barry could see like this fear come over me. And he just kind of grabbed my hand, and I'm like crying. I'm like, I'm not doing this. And Barry's like, I'm going to hold your hand this whole time, and I'm going to be right there. And I did not think that he was serious when he said he would hold my hand the whole time. And it wasn't until probably 5 dives later on my first certified dive that he let go of my hand for the first time. And he was always right there checking on me. And I mean, Barry was just like the greatest person I ever met, and he had such a love for everybody. And even at 11 years old, I could see that love for scuba diving was there. And he was not afraid to talk to anybody. And so just seeing Barry made me feel like, okay, maybe if he can just go and talk to anybody about anything, that I can too. And so he's going to be greatly missed, and we love him so much. And we love you guys.
I don't know what people remember about 2020, but it's probably COVID, right? Well, in 2020, we walked into the dive shop, and the first thing we heard was, "Hey, girl." So it's a fond memory of Barry. He used to always say, "Hey, girl," to us. But in 2020, we got certified, and if you don't know me, I'm Suzanne, and you probably know me better as Emily's mom. So Emily pushed us, and in 2020 we went and got certified as divers and just have not looked back. But our first saltwater dive that we did was in Florida in the Gulf. And we were so excited, me and Emily, to get a saltwater dive. And if you've never dove in Florida, in the Gulf, it's not the greatest, really. The visibility is not all that great, but that was a wonderful experience for us. So after that, we signed up to go to Roatan. Yeah, okay, let's go to Roatan. So we go down to Roatan, and we jump in the water, and Emily and I haven't gone down yet. We're still on the surface. And I'm sitting there, put my mask on, my regulator in my mouth, my face in the water, and I looked up, and there was Barry. And I said, "This is awesome." But see, the fish were everywhere, and the visibility was fantastic. And he said, "Sweetheart, wait till you get on the reef." And he was right. It was a wonderful trip and a wonderful experience. But true to what Zach was saying earlier, I'm a nurse practitioner, And in 2021, we got this wonderful vaccine. Where I was working, we had some extra, and Barry came to get his COVID vaccine. And as he's going through where we are, he's talking scuba diving, scuba diving, scuba diving, scuba diving. And by the time he went all the way through and had his vaccine and was finished, he had several people quite interested in scuba diving. So that was just very, just warms my heart that I got to know this wonderful man. And I'm very blessed by the whole family. So thank you. And I got it filled before Jenny.
Hi, I just have a few things to say. My name is Janine, if you haven't met me. I'm one of these people that want to become friendly. I like to talk. I like Gary. My husband and I got certified back in, I believe it was 2007, so we've been doing this for quite a while. Met Barry back then, got our first set of equipment from him. Back then they didn't even make BCDs for women. The smallest men's BCD they made when I went underwater, the shoulders were up to my ears. Took a while to get fitted with when it actually fit me, which was wonderful. But we were hooked immediately, and we've been scuba diving ever since. But what I'd really like to say is when I look around this room and see all these divers, and I know that this is a small percentage of the number of divers that are in this area, and we're here because of Barry. Barry is the reason there is such a huge number of scuba divers in this area, such a huge community of scuba diving in this tiny little inland area of the country. It's because of Barry and his love of scuba diving and the way he shared it and the way he taught it and his scuba diving shop and how welcoming he was and how good he was at having the right equipment and the right people and his ability to make it so welcoming and so accessible to all of us. And it's just made all the difference to so many of us. Over the years, I've spent a lot of money in that shop. I've spent a lot of time in that shop, spent a lot of time with Barry and all the people that work in that shop, and I love each and every one of you, all the other instructors that I've spent a lot of time with. And then after I retired and I started working part-time, doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that, one of the things that I realized was near and dear to my heart was coaching and instructing and scuba diving. And I had an idea, and I went to Barry, and I said, and he's watched me teach swimming over the years. We've often ended up in the same pool, him teaching scuba and me teaching swimming. And I went to Barry, and I said, hey, Barry, what would you think of me becoming a scuba instructor? And he said, sis. And he always called me sis. I don't know how many other people he called sis, but probably a lot. But he always called me sis, and he said, sis, I think that'd be a great idea. And so he really inspired me, helped me, and I became an instructor, and I have loved every second of it. Currently I'm grounded from the water for medical reasons, but hope to get back in as soon as possible. But it's to Barry's credit. He really encouraged me, and I know he's encouraged a lot of you to pursue this sport that we all love. So thank you to Barry and the whole community.
I'm not going to promise I won't cry. Barry was my big brother. And I guess I was the first one he taught to dive. He dragged me through the mud. We looked like we were Navy divers. You know, anything that we can find military, that's what we used. And I can remember we went to, I'm going to make it short because I won't be able to make it. I remember we went to the Keys the first time. And Barry and I went out in the boat, and it's the first time I've ever been ocean diving. We dove everywhere. So First time I'd been ocean diving. So he took these little boats out in the middle of the dang ocean. You couldn't see any land around. And Barry had got sick. He'd eat dang eggs, and it made him sick. So he was deathly sick. So we got out there, anchored out. He told me, he said, go ahead and get in. I said, hell, I ain't getting in this water. It must be 300 foot deep here. He said, look down, you can see the bottom. That's one of my experiences with Barry. That we did a lot of diving, a lot of teaching, and I just got into doing something else other than scuba diving. I got my instructors. I guess Barry, I guess it was probably 71, 72 when I got certified. And I think I got my instructors in probably about 85. But he was class act. I remember when we was kids, he used to aggravate, our older brother is, he aggravated the crap out of me anytime we did anything. And one day we was out in the front yard, and he was aggravating. I picked him up and threw him on the ground. He got up, he said, that's it. I ain't doing that no more. He went so far. He said, I'm not messing with him no more. But he's a good guy.
I don't see a whole lot of familiar faces here. I've been kind of out of the circuit a little bit for a while, but I met Barry when he was putting the shop in Kingsport, and was kind of low on cash and was curious about what he had going on. And it just so happened that he needed a hand putting that shop together, so we worked out a barter system, and I think I got the better end of the deal because he infected me pretty bad with this scuba thing. And from pool diving to diving Bonaire probably 6 or 7 times, and Honduras doing Rotan a couple times, and rivers and Santee Cooper and Blue Grotto and all of this. I mean, I tell you what, he would put you in water anywhere that was deep enough to operate scuba gear. The thing about Barry was that he was, like Carter had said, he could get the enthusiasm riled up in you that he was just so contagious. And that's one of the things I appreciate the most. I don't work with him on a couple of projects, on New River in Kentucky and so forth. And we had some great theological discussions, and Barry loved the Lord just as much as he loved scuba. We would talk about he would talk about him like Papa, and it just came out of his mouth just as natural as he would say sis or brother. And I know that he's feeling a whole lot better now. But I know he wanted to stay here because I tell you what, he had a zest for life that was also contagious. And I'm certainly a better person for knowing him, and I'm going to miss him. There's just so many memories that just kind of well up when you start to talk about it that you just can't get them all out. It kind of bottlenecks. And I missed him before he was gone because I wasn't able to be as involved with scuba as I wanted to be. But I did have the fortune to be with him last January in Bonaire. And we spent more time out of the water than we did in the water. And but of course he was always there for his little duckies. But always a pleasure to be with. He's leaving a legacy behind now that we can carry on with the shop, and I'm looking forward to taking more trips and being more involved. And I just can't say how much he's impacted my life, because I'm definitely a better person, a different person because of him. Because of his personality, his genuine concern for you, and like Brian's daughter had said, when he was talking to you or instructing you, it was just like he'd known you all his life, and he was dedicated to you to make sure that you were taken care of, and you knew that he genuinely cared, and he just totally disarmed any apprehension that you had, and being able to grow and learn. He could take you from that point of where you were in your stage of learning to being an instructor, or to being whatever it was you wanted to be in scuba. And I'm sure it wasn't just scuba that he was good at that at, but this is what we're talking about. So anyway, yeah, it's an honor to know him, and I look forward to seeing him again. There's going to be more adventures when we get there to be with him. And if you know me, you know me, and if you don't, maybe you're better off. But I can say this, if he would want this to be said, and it may be already been said because I slipped in late, that if you're not sure where you're going, when you close your eyes, you need to do that. Because there's no guarantee you're going to make it home today. You may not make it. And you're not in it, you aren't this body. If you lose your arm, you're still you. If you're paralyzed, you're still you. God made you a specific person, and you're unique. You're the best you that will ever be, because there will never be another one like you. And he loves you just as much as he loved Barry, as much as he loves me. And if you're not certain about where you're going, if you think that's because I've been good or whatever, you need to know, because you know the Father. Like we knew Barry. The love that you know. When you knew Barry and you were with Barry, you knew that Barry loved you and Barry cared for you. You have to have that same kind of knowledge with God. And that happens through Jesus Christ. There's nothing you can do other than just say, you know what? I can't do this thing. I can't be good enough. It's just because you paid the price for me to have eternal life. And that's where I want to be. When I die, I want to be there. My reservation has been changed from smoking to non-smoking. So that's because of what Jesus did. And Barry made the same choice. And I'm glad he did, because I do look forward to seeing him again. And I'm going to miss him here. But, you know, it's going to happen sooner than we think. And, yeah, it's an honor to be sitting here and speaking in front of you all. And seeing some familiar faces. And I look forward to maybe blowing some bubbles with you. Not the double bubbles, maybe, but, you know.
Hi, my name's Tony. How I met Barry. Well, it started out, me and some old college buddies decided we was going to get together and try to do something before we got too old to do anything. And so we had a great trip. Went to Cozumel. Had a great dive trip. Came back while I was there in Cozumel. Went on an excursion, and we went and dove a cenote. And I got bit by the cenote, or cave bug, as you like to say. So I came back and went to Barry. I got to learn how to cavern and cave dive. So we went through all that, his cavern course, and then I wanted to go further. And he took me through his cave course that he had. And we went a lot of places, and you know, he went individually with me because there was no other student. You know, he took that time. He'd take that time for an individual, just like he would a group. But on our trips, we spent a lot of time together. When you spend 13, 15 hours driving somewhere, you get to know a person. Coming back. And as it progressed, you know, people always said, well, what are you seeing on there? I said, wet rocks. But, you know, we get to see a part of God's creation that very few people ever get to see. You know, and you're an exclusive group as scuba divers. As a cave diver, we get a little more exclusive. I think I read want somewhere there's less than 6,000 fully certified cake divers in the world. But when you go there, it seems like all of them show up on that day. You can't find a place to park. So, get to know Barry as over the trips and over the years. He was a friend. He was a mentor. I learned a lot from him. As time went on, I progressed. I became an instructor for him. That wasn't in the plan. So yeah, we spent a lot of time and a lot of money at the shop. So we spent a lot of time with Barry. And I know, like Brian said, we went on a few dives, so probably we shouldn't have went on them. I look forward to going one more time with him. And I'm a believer. And out of the throne flows a river, and it goes into a crystal sea out in front of the throne room. Me and Barry's going to sneak off and do a drift dive and go right down to the sea, okay? We got a plan, all right? So, thanks, Barry, for all the adventures and being Barry. I love y'all.
Can I speak, Greg? My name is Liddy, and my husband and I had many, many trips with Barry, and some with Marilyn also. Gosh, that quarry was so cold, remember? Oh my gosh. So I've been with Barry to Bonaire several times, to Roatan, to San Salvador, to Trek Lagoon, and to Place Palau, and places that I not even remember now. One thing that I remember, Barry used to call me sweetie all the time, as probably for many of you. And so sometimes I think in scuba diving, even if I'm in the ocean somewhere, I can hear Barry's voice. Hey, sweetie, remember to do this. Remember that. Remember that. And one thing, he had an incredible memory, because I believe that was of the first time that I dove with Barry, I said that I always want to see seahorse and scorpionfish. So any time that I was diving with Barry, he would make sure that if he saw a seahorse or a scorpionfish, he would find me somewhere in the ocean and bring me to that space where that scorpionfish or the seahorse was. And besides all that, I believe that, as many of you had shared, gosh, my heart's beating so fast right now. Woo. Barry had, and Barry has, this caring, this caring for life, this caring for safety, this caring for people, this extremely caring for the ocean, for the fish, the plants, and I feel that from all of us here in this room, and so many that has met Barry, if there is something that they will never forget, is that ocean, Barry, and love was one and all. So, thank you, and thank you. Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, Zach. Nice to meet you, Carter. and thank you for everybody there, Greg, and everybody that work and is still working at the shop.
many that I have met through the years, many that I have never met yet personally, many that I dove with, and Frank, good to see you. And so anyway, thank you.
My name is Lauren. I'm not a public speaker at all. At the theme of this story, you'll realize Barry's telling me to face that fear and get up and talk to you guys. My husband and I are very new to diving, but the community here has welcomed us with open arms. It's something my husband has always wanted to do. I almost drowned as a child, so it was very hard to overcome that, to get into scuba diving. Everybody at Smoky Mountain, like I said, welcomed us with open arms and was so patient with me, including Barry, including Greg. I remember, coming in to the shop. It seems to be nicknames are Barry's theme. He always called me Ladybug. And so that's something that I could always count on anytime I walked in the shop. He'd be like, hey Ladybug, how you doing? When we were talking about diving and he was, helping me with getting my open water in, he kind of told me this story. It's a fear is a good thing. He said, but Ladybug, you can do this. You take those fears and you put them in a folder. You put them in that drawer, you don't lock it, because fear is healthy, fear is good, but it shouldn't overcome. So you put those fears in that folder and you close that drawer, so that it's there when you need to revisit, but know that you can overcome that and you can do it. And you can become part of this community and become part of a different way of life that many people don't even get to experience. Under that water is something completely just astounding. And so it's because of Barry, of Greg, of all the people that we've met in the scuba diving community, both here and we have a great dive community in Florida as well. It's so much more than just scuba diving. It's life and it's friendship and it's mentorship and just community and fellowship. So Barry meant the world to me. Like I said, I know we haven't known each other long, but he's touched my life, and I hope you guys know that. And like I said, he was telling me to get up here and say that today. So love you guys.
We are going to end kind of just formal sharing time, if you will. But that does not mean leave. We got snackage. And feel free to hang out, share more stories. The story that Gabe wanted to share was he really liked it when we would go to the dive shop and Opa would be playing rock and roll music on his computer. So he's learning right. But again, thank you all so much for being here. We love you guys. You're all a blessing, and we appreciate how you guys have supported us in every way imaginable. Thank you guys.
Sorry, I'm trying to gather myself. I'm Amelia. I am Carter's wife. I had the privilege of knowing Padre, as we would call him, for 19 years. We called him Padre because Carter said when he would go on dive trips with a whole group of people that if he said Dad, everybody would turn around. So he called Barry Padre. And so our kids, Isaac and Taylor, grew up referring to Barry as Padre. My first impression of Padre It was our first Christmas that we spent together in 2006. And I remember going into the closet and seeing this big box, and it said Christmas ornaments. And I was like, that's odd. What guy has a box of Christmas ornaments in their closet? And so Carter pulls them out, and we're decorating our Christmas tree, and each one of these Christmas ornaments, Barry had bought for Carter, and they're called Frosty Friends. You guys might remember the Hallmark ornaments. And so I just thought that that was such a cool tradition to have as a father-son. Mary Helen, do you have the ornaments too? Cool. So every Christmas when we get out to decorate the tree, I always think of Padre and just how cool that is. All the boys, they have their little ornaments too. So prior to meeting Carter and getting married, my parents are also avid scuba divers. And for years and years, they had been trying to convince me to get certified. And I was like, oh, I will, I'm gonna get certified, I am. And so it was serendipity that I would meet a husband that had that same passion. And I'm so thankful that that passion has been passed down to our children, and it's something that I've been able to share with my family as well, and some of my most fond memories. My dad is also getting up there in age, and I'm starting to realize like I've got to take advantage of every dive trip and continue to make those memories with him. And I'm so thankful that Barry got to meet my parents, and we've had some amazing vacations together. But I would say that truly I appreciate Barry the most for pouring all his love and the countless hours of Boy Scouting, and he made my husband who he is today, and for that I'm forever grateful. I feel like I actually know Padre more through your stories of him, and I just am so eternally grateful for him, for pouring his love into you guys. And Marilyn, just to see the support that you've given to him over all these years, truly inspiring. So thank you all for coming. What an incredible man he was. He was so graceful underwater too. He just, oh, beautiful. I'll never forget that. So thank you.